Welcome back after a Christmas break. We are live with another episode of Deep Dive, and we are going to talk about the early years of TNA, specifically talking about the women that really pushed to really build up something great in TNA, and many times has been overlooked in these talks with TNA returning. So stay tuned.
10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
Welcome back, guys, to Deep Dive. I'm really excited to come back in this new year talking about the early years of TNA because I think over the past 2 months, everyone has been clamoring and chomping at the bit, waiting for the Hard to Kill pay-per-view that will be on January 13th, this Saturday, and specifically looking forward to this because Impact Wrestling will be going back to their roots as they return to their trademark name, TNA. And I think that it seems like they won't only be returning back to TNA in name, but also going back to that ballsy, in-your-face, unapologetic, nonstop action model that the company was known for. And on this episode of Deep Dive, I want to explore the early days of TNA, but specifically the women that helped and were featured in those early stages of the company that, in my opinion, usually don't get the attention or recognition that they deserve when we have been recently talking about memories and nostalgic moments from TNA. And these women really had to push through a very weird, sketchy time in wrestling because we were really in that weird phase right after the Attitude Era where a lot of women that really have been very serious about wrestling on the US scene kind of had their athletic skills kind of mocked and they were not used properly. They were, if I'm being completely honest, used to appeal to more of like a softcore porn demographic that really just wanted to see women in evening gown matches and that would chant very derogatory things to the women during the matches because they had been trained to feel that that was completely fine, not just in WWE, but pretty much in every promotion at the time. So these women really had to battle. The women that really wanted to have full-fledged divisions really had to battle at that time to even make that a possibility. And many times they would take on guys to really show their toughness or really put on some death-defying spots to get on the card for the night and prove themselves. So these are the women that I really want to talk about today because I'm really hoping that maybe that can also be touched upon when we see the presentations possibly of nostalgic memories or moments in TNA in the past. But in order for us to talk about this, we have to get into the creation of TNA. TNA was conceived to be strictly available to fans on pay-per-view weekly. And it would also allow TNA to not feel that they can exist and thrive without a coveted TV deal. And when we're seeing at that time, it was really hard for a lot of US promotions to thrive. We really only had WWE after we saw the ending of WCW and ECW. WWE was really trying to find their bearings as well, as they hadn't really formulated what this new chapter was going to be for them. I would say after 2001, we still had some great things that were happening in WWE, but there was a lot of unplanned, unformulated, in a way, just like quickly putting certain things together. We had the draft at this time where they were trying to make sure they were establishing different brands to handle all of the talent that came from these other promotions that folded around 2001. So you see people like Jeff Jarrett that are trying to create another promotion for wrestlers at that time to be able to perform. And I really actually have to highlight this blueprint that TNA started out with wanting to have the weekly pay-per-views and not having to rely on a TV deal. Because if you really look at it, that kind of having the weekly pay-per-views were an early sign of what we see now with promotions fully utilizing streaming services in YouTube so that their smaller promotions can still get a really solid fan base and they can have that weekly or monthly or bi-weekly audience and be able to make revenue off of what they're doing. So this was kind of like an early set on of that. And the weekly pay-per-views also allowed TNA to be able to have an edgier production than WWE at the time. And that's certainly what we got with this early set on of TNA. Vince Russo was brought into the fold as a writer. And in the first year of TNA, which was 2002, we see a stark difference in how the women were used then compared to now. And at the same time, their formula for using the women just sticks to the use of women in wrestling during that post-Attitude Era, but not fully into that golden era that we started to see when women were really being utilized. And you started seeing a light at the end of the tunnel in some ways around 2003, 2004. At that time in 2002, we see the beginnings of TNA, and they're trying to obviously figure out what they stand for, what their brand would be like. And I have to be completely honest. At that time in TNA in 2002, the women were literally just brought in there for literally what people think about when they think of the slogan TNA. We had our organized cat fights, lingerie, battle royals. It was just insane. And you're trying to, have some respect for the women that are coming in. But unfortunately, you usually have women that didn't have training in wrestling. They were seen in other promotions, but they were not brought in, obviously, to fight. But this was sadly the norm. We saw early sightings of women like Alexis Lurie, who would become Mickie James, Desire, Taylor Vaughn, Jasmine St. Clair, who we know from many other things, but ECW, who to be on the promotion, Elektra, who was also in ECW at the time, Shannon Sproul, who would later be known as Daphne, had a little small, chance to come into TNA, but was not really used also. And we even had the Queen of Extreme, Francine, come in at this time. We had cage dancers at this time. And I don't know if TNA had the idea that they would have like a mixture of a party club type of environment with them being in Nashville and having the TNA Asylum. I don't really know what the thought process was with this. I thought it was absolutely hilarious that when the announcement for TNA coming back was made, that immediately Tasha Steelz put her campaign in to bring back the cage dancers, as she would be a part of that. And of course, I don't really even think there'll be any complaints now because of how women are used. That we'll let the cage dancers slide. But at this time, this was really all that you were seeing from the women. We had Francine come in, and I remember with many clips of Francine talking about her time in TNA at the time. I don't think that there's any surprise that there wasn't any thought really being put into these segments that Francine and other women were in. Even with them having what they were going to have, like a Miss TNA, they even made a mockery of something that could have been good with that, where they just decided to have a male wrestler win Miss TNA, and he was saying that he was deserving of it because he was gay. Just like some things I'm going to mention on this episode, of course, would not happen in TNA now, but it happened in 2002. So at this time, we come out of 2002, and we start to see more of what we know TNA for the women that were part of TNA to be now. We start to see the rumblings of that in 2003. So we have women like Desire coming in, who actually was a really awesome wrestler. And I tried, guys, I tried to find more pictures of her because I was a really big fan of her, because 2003 was around the time that I started finding out about TNA and I started watching, and she was certainly someone that I really liked. We started seeing women like April Hunter come in and really have some solid matches as well. We also start to see my favorites. We see, as I was mentioning before, and I will go back to this, but we see Alexis Lurie, who becomes Mickie James. She starts to have some awesome things going on. We have Trinity, not to be confused with Trinity that we have in TNA now, but Trinity from 2002, 2003, 2004, and I think a little bit 2005 in TNA. And I just have to take a moment to spotlight Trinity, because with these conversations I've been hearing lately, I need to hear more about Trinity being brought up, because she, to me, was the foundation for this campaign to have women in TNA actually have solid spots on the roster. She was just phenomenal. And while I was doing my research for this, I was kind of going back in time, seeing a lot of matches and moments that I loved for Trinity. And one thing I saw was this awesome like highlight reel that TNA produced at the time to really build up interest in Trinity. And just even her background with her being a stunt woman, and just having more of like this daredevil personality, where she would just pull off these amazing moonsaults off the top rope, off a cage, and just always land them so perfectly. You could see that even with the people that Trinity was managing, she, even without her doing it on purpose, she would take the spotlight because she was just so talented that there was a no-brainer that she was starting to whet the palate of many fans to want to see some women actually have a spotlight and have solid matches on the roster. And I really hope that when we see this Hard to Kill pay-per-view on Saturday, that her time in TNA is highlighted, because in those early stages of TNA getting their bearings, I mean, only a few months into TNA becoming a thing, Trinity was showing that there could be a good women's division. And with one of the rare interviews that I've seen with Trinity, the host brought a really good point that in many ways, Trinity being one of the only or one woman in TNA at the time around 2003, the way that they were marketing Trinity in 2003 and 4, she kind of was setting that same trail as you saw with the Alundra Blaze, not saying that, not comparing them as far as legendary status, but comparing their plight, where Trinity was one of the women on the roster, and sometimes we have other women come in, but with her efforts, with working really hard and showing how tough she was, how many great matches she could have. She could actually have really great storylines. She was trying to set the tone for what a possible division could be. And I feel that many times she does not get the ability to be mentioned amongst the women that we know and we love and we usually talk about when we talk about the formation of the Knockouts division, which happened years later, but Trinity was setting that tone years prior to that. So I feel that Desire, April Hunter, and Trinity really helped to make up what 2003 would be, and they were helping to change the tide of how the women were talked about in the industry, and to help solidify that some other women that were on the indie scene could come in at times and have really great matches with them. So I just had to take a moment to spotlight Trinity, because she was one of those women that I immediately thought about when I started thinking about TNA coming back full-fledged. And I have to go back to Alexis Lurie at this time, because she came back into TNA after being away for a few months with a more aggressive gimmick, and she had her sights set on taking down Trinity in March and April. And she would have like these really great promos where she was showing that she was all business and that these were going to be hard fought matches. And both Trinity and Alexis was able to have intergender matches with men like Jeff Jarrett and Kid Cash, and he really made them look tough as nails and helped to dissolve these very sexist gimmicks that you saw in matches the year prior. And specifically with Alexis, she was a part of Raven's flock. And I just love that they gave her, in my opinion, such a coveted spot, because I really thought I had a cool picture when Alexis was in Raven's flock. That's cool. She was a part of Raven's flock, and Alexis at the time was a part of some very hardcore males matches that they were having, and she was taking the brunt of many of the hard spots that they had in those matches. And I think that many times the history of what Mickie James did before she went to WWE and then came back to TNA is kind of lost, but those were some really cool moments because of how much she was doing and how she was standing toe-to-toe with guys that were in the company and having some really great matches with being a part of that Ravens flock faction. So those two women were really helping to set the tone during that 2003 year. And then we go to Tracy Brooks coming in. And it's kind of funny, as we brought the cage dancers, that Tracy Brooks initially was brought in as a cage dancer who took the spot of the resident cage dancer, Lollipop. Yes, her name was Lollipop. And then she gets put into the women's division scene shortly after. So we start seeing the first sightings of someone that will become a very intricate part of the Knockouts division, Tracy Brooks, and some of her first few months into the company. And she's also immediately showing that she is a very talented wrestler, that she obviously has paid her dues to get to this point in TNA, and that she wants to bring something also to the table with trying to create a slew of women that could potentially create a women's division. So in 2003, Desire sustains a back injury in July while facing Mercedes Martinez, but she makes a comeback in 2004. That was quite impressive, and I definitely will get into that as we get into 2004. But before that, in 2003, towards the end, we see TNA recognizing the NWA Women's World Championship by having Leilani Kai win the title against Madison during a house show on March 12, 2003. And this should come as no surprise, as at the time, NWA and TNA had a partnership. So I thought it was pretty cool that even though it was on house shows, they still allowed the NWA World Women's Championship to be featured, and to allow us to have those times when we could see that there was some form of a women's title, a prestigious one, a recognized one, actually be defended inside of the TNA umbrella. Now, just like I said, these matches were not featured or televised on pay-per-views or shows like early on shows like TNA Explosion. And Leilani Kai expressed some frustration with that. She rightfully felt that there wasn't much care in showing these amazing matches that they were having for the NWA Women's title or exposing it to a national audience. And she expressed that frustration by missing shows, so she was stripped of that title. But and it would have been really cool to actually see that televised. Just like I was saying, this was like almost a full year for TNA, so they were still trying to develop what they were going to be doing and how they were going to showcase not only the women but the men of the company. And the title still was NWA, so I I believe maybe TNA was trying to make sure that they were fully showcasing some of their homegrown talent. So it's just kind of, like a tricky situation. So this kind of takes us into 2004, and we start seeing early sightings of Angel Williams, who would later on become Angelina Love. She starts having some moments where she's dipping her toe into TNA for a few offshoot matches with Trinity, and as you can see, Angel is very young into the business, but she shows a lot of promise, and she's helping to really continue to develop Trinity as the head. I can't say the knockouts division, but the head of the women's roster that they're starting to develop at this time. And at this time, Desire gets back into the fold after her back injury, and she has a really great feud with Trinity. And Trinity starts to have a bit of a turn in 2004 and becomes a heel. And Desire steps right into the babyface role and even has a stretcher match with Trinity to help settle this bitter rivalry. But Trinity does win this, and this is actually one of my favorite feuds from 2004. Honestly, it really helped that there were amazing video packages for this feud, and to really push what these women had gone through already with battling each other in 2003, and really gave this feud in 2004 a history. And they had the factions that both women were part of actually be involved in this. And Trinity and Desire worked hard over the past 2 years to show that they cared very deeply about their characters. They really wanted to go full-fledged into a feud, and it certainly showed. And it showed that TNA actually cared about making sure that they had a solid feud. So kudos to them for having, to me, a very important feud be involved in these very early stages of TNA. And to end off the year of 2024 for the women, we had a surprising debut. I don't think one that anyone was expecting, and that was from Jacqueline, but she would become Jackie Moore during her time in TNA. And this was a bit surprising because not too long, maybe a few months before she debuted in TNA, she actually won the Cruiserweight title from Chavo Guerrero on SmackDown. So you can start to see that you can have people that you think are completely fine in another company during this time, but as soon as we know it, sometimes they could come to TNA and make these surprising debuts and really enjoy their time in the company. And Jacqueline comes in to TNA during the Victory Road pay-per-view of that year, and she has a match. She takes on the challenge from Trinity, who is extremely cocky at this time, fully in her hero role, and she has declared that no one, especially as she feels any women on the roster, can actually take her. And that's when we have Jacqueline come out, and of course she is confident as ever, and she takes on Trinity. And it was a really cool way to end off that that year with showing the potential of what the women had, and bringing someone as legendary, as experienced as Jackie Moore was a really, really good move on TNA's part. And to me, as a fan, that really started to make me feel that we were going to get a full-fledged division soon, because it seemed like they didn't just bring Jackie in just to be on screen, but possibly help to really establish these women as wrestlers. And I don't have any confirmation on that, but I really feel that it was a statement that the women were going to be taken seriously on TNA, and that they really wanted to build something here with a move like that, with getting someone like Jacqueline, who's not coming for anything else but to brawl. So that was awesome. We go into 2005 with TNA having their weekly show now, Impact, on Spike, and it debuts, and it really starts to bring more of a female presence into the programming. We have Tracy Brooks and Trinity, who surprisingly get these roles of being Dusty Rhodes' assistants backstage, and they vie for the ability to get his attention, to be the best assistant. And I was a bit puzzled by this choice when I first saw it. Going back, actually, I was more surprised because when you go back, you start seeing the timeline and you start seeing how much Trinity was doing with her feuds and what Tracy Brooks was also doing. So it was a bit confusing why they would put these women in that position, especially when they were having such great matches in the previous year. But we also see that Tracy starts to move into really getting established as a manager when she starts to manage Matt Bentley. And we have, at this time in 2005, another surprising debut. We have the debut of Gail Kim. And obviously, Gail Kim will be one of, I wouldn't say the most, because there were so many amazing women that actually made up the roster of the Knockouts, but pretty much on the Mount Rushmore of the Knockouts division, I think always will be Gail Kim. And Gail Kim debuts and she attacks Team 3D alongside Jeff Jarrett and America's Most Wanted, which is one of the best tag teams in TNA's history, and she starts to manage America's Most Wanted shortly after her debut. I thought this was a great way to bring in Gail Kim. I think that she had amazing chemistry with America's Most Wanted, and it was a great way for her to come in and not be left to the wayside, because many times when Gail was managing America's Most Wanted, she would have these moments to get these really cool spots, and just to remind people that she can handle business in the ring too. And just like many times Gail Kim and Tracy Brooks had mentioned, that they behind the scenes at this time were really fighting for a Knockouts division. So even though they were in these managerial roles, they took it very seriously to really campaign and push for a women's division. But even then, I loved the managing position that they were put in at that time, managing some great talent and then getting their moments and to have great spots. And we don't stop with debuts at this time. We have Jackie Gator come in straight from WWE. On November 25th, 2005, we have a former Tough Enough winner, Jackie Gator, make her debut, and she comes in immediately lashing out at a very confused Jeff Jarrett. And this leads into a feud with Jackie and Gail Kim, because Jackie alleged at the time that Jeff Jarrett promised her a spot on the roster, and it looked like that job was given to Gail Kim instead. So this feud went into 2006, where Jackie tried to blackmail Jeff Jarrett, but he wound up having some dirt on Jackie Gator, and she was forced to be an assistant to Jeff and the rest of his faction and Gail. So you know that Gail was going to go all the way in and making sure that Jackie felt like she regretted ever coming into TNA. And after a while, after all of the embarrassing, degrading job that Gail specifically gave Jackie to do, we see that they become completely dissatisfied with Jackie and they fire her from the role. But it was also because Jackie Gator was legitimately pregnant at the time. So that ends that feud and the appearances from Jackie. And we don't see Jackie Gator in TNA anymore after that. But I did like the time that Jackie was in there, the interaction, the feud that she did have with Gail at the time. And who's to say what could have happened with Jackie if she would have stayed. But I thought it was a solid feud between Gail Kim and Jackie Gator at the time. So this takes us into 2006. And TNA partnered with UWF to put on some indie shows during this year that featured Jazz, Jackie Gator, Tracy Brooks, Jacqueline, and Amber O'Neal. And I was able to, thanks to this awesome person that uploaded those matches, I was able to actually see that partnership between UWF, which I believe is a Midwest promotion, and TNA, using their talent from TNA too. And I personally would have liked to see these matches on TNA programming, because April O'Neil was really putting on some great matches. Obviously, Jazz, of course, should have, in my opinion, been on Impact, competing with women like Gail Kim and Jackie Gator and Tracy Brooks on TNA programming. But just know that these matches actually exist on YouTube. You should definitely check it out. In 2006, we see that Gail and Tracy Brooks are starting to get more opportunities and to be seen on screen to deliver some impressive matches, and this continues to help push the fact that a women's division is a no-brainer for TNA. So 2006 was a very important year for those gears to really get turning if they weren't already convinced in the back to really develop a knockouts division. So we also see at this time that SoCal Val officially, because she had been seen plenty of times before, she's officially signed to TNA in 2006, and she became a permanent fixture in the company. And I believe she brought a bubbly, exciting, fun personality to the mix, and she would rev up the crowd, which is awesome. Just someone that I believed everyone really enjoyed seeing near the ring. And though she was not a wrestler, SoCal Val still made an impact with the ring side attendant, ring announcing, and interviewing skills that she brought to the table during her tenure with the company. And she had an awesome storyline with Jay Lethal in 2008 that I still always love to go back to and just chuckle at because of all the things that Jay Lethal and SoCal Val were doing at the time. With that. So she definitely deserves to be in this discussion about the early days of TNA. We see another debut from Christy Hemme that also she just came fresh from WWE. Christy Hemme was the 2004 Diva Search winner. So I'm pretty sure that Christy Hemme knew coming into TNA that she probably would have to prove herself after being in the Diva Search. It was not something that anyone was really bragging about at the time because of that stigma that it had with having women that were not passionate about wrestling, but were just taking the opportunity to be able to be on TV. So you see Christy really come in and really try to start from the ground up to prove that she actually cared about being in the wrestling business. And she embarked on a lot of hosting and promoting for the company, and did that for quite a bit, many years, and really became a staple in TNA for that. And we have something that's a bit bittersweet and kind of makes me think, what if? We have Sherry Martel make her last TV appearance in TNA at this time, and she was coming in, as you see in this, talking to Bobby Roode at the time about potentially managing him, as Bobby Roode's storyline at the time was that he was looking for a manager that would take him to the top, to let him go to that next level in his career. And this would have been awesome if Sherry could have actually managed him. I mean, we know Sherry has a long line of people that she helped take to the top. And with Bobby Roode showing so much promise at that time, this would have been a match made in heaven. But unfortunately, Father Time had other plans. We know that in 2006, Sherry Martel did pass away. But one thing that I have to see the silver lining in is that Sherry was able to leave this world knowing that she was a Hall of Famer in our eyes, and she was able to get that honor before she left. But I still would have loved to have seen Sherry Martel represent Bobby Roode, because I think that that would have been like another step or evolution in her career as a manager. And who knows who else she could have managed in TNA at that time. But like I said, you can't ever take away the plans that are to be. But I am happy that at this time, Sherry Martel was getting her flowers for her managerial skills, because she's just one of the best when it came to that. So we see going into this next year in 2007, which is such an important year for the women in TNA, we get to see the continuation of the feud between the Pride of Tennessee, Jackie Moore, and Gail Kim heat up to a scorching level. And we as fans of these women couldn't have been happier. With the breakup of America's Most Wanted, Gail was trying to be a mediator, but instead she collided with James Storm and his new manager, Jackie Moore. These women were given free rein to beat the crap out of each other, and this resulted in them participating in the first ever women's steel cage match in TNA at the Lockdown pay-per-view at that time. And these women threw the kitchen sink at each other, and it's just always a classic match. They had arm wrestling matches. They were beating each other up in bathrooms during this time. They were just chomping at the bit to show how far they can go in this feud, and it was very entertaining to see, and actually one of my favorite feuds in TNA. After this feud, Tracy Brooks is brought back into the feud of having some more matches, not just managing, and she's pulling off some great matches, and you can see she's being added to the list of women that will be a part of the independent women's roster. All of the hard work that these women put on in these past few years leads to the historic moment in late 2007 where we see the official formation of the Knockouts division. And this happens at the Bound for Glory pay-per-view of that year in the 10-woman gauntlet match, which Gail Kim wins to become the inaugural champion. So it's just a very important moment in TNA for the women. And in this match, we have a lot of introductions to women that will be a part of the Knockouts division. We see women like Shelly Martinez come into TNA. We see ODB, which is obviously, I think, everyone's favorite when they think about this early few years of the Knockouts division. We see women like Angelina Love, who has now made that transition from Angel Williams to Angelina Love. And of course, we know the type of history that Angelina Love will have in TNA. So this was awesome to see her return. We have Talia Madison, who later on became Velvet Sky, be a part of this gauntlet match to really establish the women's division. And then we also see the debut of Awesome Kong. And this was a moment where I think that everyone had a moment where they were quiet and just observing the phenomenon of Awesome Kong in this match, and it was a great introduction. So despite Gail Kim being the champ at this time, we see Awesome Kong completely decimate the Knockouts roster with women like Christy Hemme, Velvet Sky, and Angelina Love. So we start to see how much of a force Awesome Kong would be, and how that really starts to develop and in many ways change the landscape of a TNA, with having such a immovable object like Awesome Kong really come to change the point of view of who could be a knockout or who could be the head of a women's division, and people just strictly looking at how much of a force she is, how freaking talented she is, and not always thinking about who can be the woman that can be stereotypically on a magazine cover and having that person lead a division. It was all about what did you bring to the table in the ring. And I think that Awesome Kong was definitely one of the biggest examples of people that are truly talented actually getting their just dues and being able to have the ability to lead a division. We also see Roxy Laveau come into the mix, and she was added to the roster to bring in this eerie New Orleans gypsy witch doctor element to the Knockouts division that was really refreshing to see, because we already see the great wrestling skills, but it was really cool to see that each woman really had a solid hook to what their character was going to be and how it really separated all of them to have fans like me be able to fully describe why I like this particular wrestler and why I liked another without feeling that they were carbon copies of each other. And Roxy is certainly one of those examples. And we have ODB, who came in, that to me was one of the most unique characters that TNA had, I think, ever, because she was just that pickup driver, flask carrying, alcohol spilling, crotch grabbing wrestler that you really love, but you never really saw a woman have that type of character. And honestly, I don't think there will ever be anyone else on the Knockouts roster like ODB. She, you could have people that might try to imitate that now, but she was certainly one of the very few that really stuck by having a character like that that usually was never featured on TV, specifically on a women's roster. And it was just really refreshing to see, because you could see how sincere her character was and how she was just really being true to herself. So that was just really awesome to see. I really enjoyed this year in TNA because we were really seeing that all that work over the past few years had paid off, and the fans were so invested in seeing this division take hold. So now we get into 2008, and this year starts off with another knockout gauntlet match, which ODB wins. We also get to see, and we obviously usually get to this when we're talking about the history of the knockouts, the Awesome Kong and Gail Kim feud that really made that year. This year sees a series of matches between the two that will set the tone for the legitimacy of the Knockouts division, but also the legitimacy of the newly crowned Knockouts title as well. And nothing proved more that the company and the fans were behind what this feud was doing and what that title represented than when Awesome Kong and Gail Kim main evented the January 10th episode of Impact. That was a really huge moment and a sign of support from TNA like no other. And they received huge ratings, so the fans really showed up for this, and that was awesome, especially a fan like me seeing women get that type of popularity for the awesome work that they were putting out there. And Kong won this match to become the knockout champion for the first time. So I think it can never go unsaid how impactful that Awesome Kong Gail Kim feud was. Yeah, it's just a great part of 2008 for the Knockouts division. And at this time, we really see the formation of the beautiful people. As I said before, we had in 2007 with that gauntlet match that really officially set up the Knockouts division, we see Talia Madison slowly progress to become Velvet Sky. And we see Angelina Love really comfortable in this new time in her career after being in TNA for some stints prior to this. And you see these two women come together to create one of the most talked about factions in TNA, the beautiful people. They had the mean girl, heelish personalities that just gelled together, and they immediately connected on wanting to cleanse the world one ugly person at a time. And one of their first victims was Roxy Lavelle. And I really liked this battle that they had with Roxy Lavelle. It was actually really entertaining. And it just really showed you the levels that Velvet Sky and Angelina Love would go to humiliate someone and really feel that they were doing the Lord's work and making sure that they were just destroying the lives of other women on the roster that they deemed too ugly to exist. And I love how they fully went into having heelish characters and really made sure that the fans despised them. They didn't shy away from it. So this was a match made in yes, you could say heaven with the beautiful people. And then at this point, we see a debut, to me, a woman that had a very organic debut that immediately the fans flocked to her, and that was Taylor Wilde. And I love the way this came together. Taylor Wilde played a kayfabe fan who was willing to participate in the $25,000 Kong challenge, where you had to be a brave soul to actually get in the ring with Kong and win the match. To win a coveted $25,000. So we had Sojo Vogt, Leva Bates, and Serena Deeb come in, not as we know them now, but just as fans to compete with Kong, and they were quickly annihilated in all of these attempts. And then on one night, we have this bright-eyed, baby-faced Taylor Wilde look like she could actually do it. She had the courage. She even looked like she had strategy, but she did not win. But she showed promise. And even after the match, you see the fans still clapping for her because they felt like she really showed some moxie getting into that ring with someone like Awesome Kong. And on June 26th of that year, Taylor Wilde comes back to challenge Kong. And clearly, Taylor has balls to do this. She comes back July 3rd to challenge Raja Saeed, and she won the match to earn an opportunity to face Kong. And the next week, she boldly goes back into the ring with Kong, and she pulled off an amazing David and Goliath story to win the Knockouts title. And obviously, she had an amazing run after that. And I think, like, when you're talking about really setting up a babyface to have a strong following, I think that Taylor Wilde is one of those stories that you want to put up there, because immediately fans connected with her. And I think that Awesome Kong did a good job prior to that, when she was having this $25,000 challenge, to show how none of these women stood a chance, but you had someone that obviously had a stark height and weight difference to Awesome Kong, but she had that fighter's heart, and that really got the fans going to feeling like she's someone that they will want to see after that. And for her to win the title, and that pop that Taylor Wilde got when she won the title, is one certainly to remember. So I absolutely love the way that they brought Taylor, and they really thought about how they could really get her over, and it was just brilliantly done. So that was a hell of an introduction, the debut for Taylor. I have to get into another huge thing for the Knockouts, which is that they had the Knocked Out DVD that came out, and this DVD helped to capsulize all of the amazing moments that the Knockouts division had. And it's also crazy to think about so many moments that they had in this DVD when the Knockouts division was only a few months old. So I was happy to go back and kind of see all of these landmark moments that the Knockouts division had, and how many women. I just love when you're showing all of the Knockouts standing in front of the entrance ramp. You're seeing, even without them talking, how many personalities are there and how diverse it is. It was just really cool to go back in time and look at that. And TNA as a whole was showing that they were now becoming a talking point in wrestling. But the Knockouts were really getting a moment in the sun during this year, showing that they were a division that was getting the respect that they deserved. And they were leading a conversation around what a US promotion with valuable TV time could do to showcase women on their roster. And most importantly, that the audience was backing them too, and they really wanted to see these women. So during this time, we have more introductions of women coming into the roster, like Raja Saeed, which was one of my favorite characters. I love that she came in as a manager for Awesome Kong and did a brilliant job at that, but they eventually started to let Raja start to have her own matches as well to show what she can do. And especially because I knew that cheerleader Melissa was the one underneath the veil, I really wanted to see her have matches, and I got my wish. So that was really cool that they let her transition from a manager to an in-ring performer. We also have Peyton Banks that comes at the time. She starts off a really great feud with Tracy Brooks, as Tracy removes herself from being the manager of Bobby Roode because of the harassment and just disgusting things that Bobby was saying to really just take away any type of self-esteem or pride that she had. So that was a really great feud. Also, we have Selena transform from Shelly Martinez to Selena's and have a really great pairing with LAX. And that was one of my favorite times for all of the members of LAX. And I think that Selena deserves to have that attention towards what she brought to the table for that faction. So she was one that I definitely had to highlight. We also have Sojo Boat come at this time. And I was a big fan of hers because I felt like she was someone just like Taylor Wilde that really wanted to prove that she can stand toe-to-toe with Awesome Kong. Even though it wasn't an easy feat, the fans were also behind Soulja Boat when she would have matchups with Awesome Kong. So she's definitely one that I remember, and it was nice to go back and check out her matches. We have Madison Rayne coming at this time, and not too long after her debut, she is heavily connected with the beautiful people and really just fits right in with them, which is not always easy to do when you have two people that already have such a very close connection and really have chemistry. Madison Rayne really came in there and made herself a part of the beautiful people. So that was pretty cool to see. We see Raka Khan, who is, yes, a controversial figure at the time, but I thought she really had potential possibly to be like one of those monster heels on the Knockouts roster. And at first, it did seem like that would be the case, but at the time, I was really excited to see what she could possibly do on the women's roster. But you know, obviously what happened after that. But it was a cool debut for her because the fans were really in awe of her, and it was really cool to see them constantly bring in, just like I said, characters that were so vastly different from each other and really start to make this very layered roster of women. Let's see, Taylor Wilde and Velvet Sky and Madison Rayne, one of my favorite wrestlers to watch in TNA. Yeah, you start to see in 2008, you just start to have such an array of talent on the Knockouts roster that is really hard to think about like who could be your favorite, because there were so many women to choose from because of what they brought to the table. So I can't even choose who's my favorite at the time, because when I would go back and do research, I would think, oh yeah, I really like this one. I really like this. It was really hard to make that choice. But it was just an awesome time for the Knockouts division. And obviously we keep seeing that they keep going on with that. So let's just take a small break, and then we're gonna go into some of the later years of when I feel that TNA was truly TNA.
Hey yo, you. Yeah, you that's watching this. You sitting on the couch staring at the screen not knowing what you want to do like this is an online college. Are you tired of wearing shirts that make you look like an extra stuck in catering? Do you want to step your wrestling swag game up to the next level? Then Women's Wrestling Talk has got you covered. Like literally. Are you for life in pink or black and white? Or maybe you're the EST and people need to respect you accordingly. Want to put some pride in your stride and show off the muscle in your hustle? Then make sure you check out the WWT store. Not now, but right now. Alright? What you waiting for? Head to www.talkpodstore.com and don't make me fight you. Shit.
So we get back into 2009 now, and the beautiful people have gained a lot of steam and seem a bit unstoppable at this point. So they need competition. So that's when you start to see these makeshift teams come to develop and create more competition for the beautiful people. And we see that with the babyface team of Taylor Wilde and Roxy Laveau, both who really connected on this shared disdain that they have for the beautiful people, and it actually worked beautifully to create these really cool moments between both teams. At the time, we also see that Angelina Love wins the Knockouts title during this year. And of course, this helps to make her head swell even more as she tries to plant her flag in the ground as the head of the division. And Angelina feels that she has beaten everyone on the roster and there's no one left. So this leads to a very, very shocking debut. And we see Tara debut in 2009, right when Angelina is going on her whole spiel about not having anyone formidable to defeat. And as we know at the time, Victoria was formerly in WWE, and she comes into TNA now as the spider wielding Tara, and she debuts with us immediately thinking that these acquisitions from WWE, with them coming to TNA, specifically a lot of women starting to come in now from WWE, really goes to show that these women like Tara and WWE were watching the Knockouts division, and they were clamoring to do the same things that they were doing in TNA, but many times in WWE did not have the ability at that time because of the advent of the Diva search and them wanting women to be there for reasons that Tara didn't want to. So she came to TNA to be able to do that. And Tara was immediately put into the title hunt with her sights on the Knockouts title. She faced Angelina Love at Slammiversary that year. So we see more people coming in from WWE, and we have Sharmell who comes with Booker T around this time, and she instantly is in a feud that has Bobby Roode and Tracy Brooks in it, and it was actually a very entertaining feud, and to me, a strong competitor for like Booker T to be able to feed off of during their time debuting. So I thought that was a great way to bring in Sharmell and Booker T. And then we have another first in TNA with the first female with a Monsters Ball match between Daphne and Taylor Wilde, which was, for me, even though I'm not the most hardcore wrestling fan, I like that they had a full-fledged feud that got both women to the point where they wanted to settle out this in a Monsters Ball match. This was something that Daphne started to, to do in TNA. Became kind of like her thing. So it was good to see that she had someone like Taylor Wilde that can match that same energy, but really come off as the baby face to Daphne's heel like character to really push this match. And I think that they did an amazing job in this, and both women got the results that they needed in this match to really be seen as the great competitors that they were. We also see that TNA is kind of having a lot of teams come together with the Knockouts. So it's just inevitable to create a TNA Knockouts tag team champion. And the first happens to be Sarita and Taylor Wilde, who I think made up a really great team at the time. They won the inaugural TNA Knockouts Tag Team Championships at No Surrender that year during an 8-woman tag team tournament. And I think that this was a great pairing at the time. And usually those early years of the TNA Women's Tag Team titles aren't usually talked about as much, but it actually did start off pretty well, in my opinion, and continue on to what we see now. And you see during this time in 2009 that Sharmell is just enjoying the elite life as she is a part of the Main Event Mafia. And I must say, during the early stages of Main Event Mafia, I was purely entertained because you saw this coming together of former WWE and WCW wrestlers, and it just seemed like they weren't given direction. They would just do whatever they wanted to, having these amazing promos that were just hilarious, especially with Booker T and Sharmell and Scott Steiner sometimes going off the rails. So it was a very entertaining faction in the beginning, and I like that Sharmell was able to have fun and enjoy that time as well. So we see, and I just touched on it a bit, but I want to kind of put a spotlight on it. We see this revamped character of Daphne right before our eyes, when she comes in purely as a joke, and using her acting background to play a joke on the beautiful people as she comes in for a favor that Roxy and Taylor want her to do to imitate Sarah Palin, pretend that she's actually Sarah Palin, who at the time was vouching to become the vice president of the United States. And the beautiful people are so excited because they feel that this will put them at an elite level if they met Sarah Palin. And the whole time, it actually was Daphne who Roxy and Taylor Wilde eventually wound up beating up and humiliating the beautiful people. But the beautiful people take this out on Daphne as well, who was just coming into the joke. And this makes Daphne snap. And she completely changes her character into what we saw later on, as you can see here, into this darker, unhinged character who is talking about how betrayed she felt and how Roxy and Taylor Wilde did not have her back when she was getting attacked by the beautiful people. And that made her feel like she can't really trust anyone but herself. And I feel that the type of work that TNA allowed Daphne to do on this character made her one of the best characters in the Knockouts division at this time. And I loved her therapy sessions that they would show throughout, and her in-ring matches were just great. So I had to make sure I took out the time to bring out this evolution of Daphne's character because it was one that I truly enjoyed. So at the end of 2009, we see Angelina Love is replaced in the Beautiful People faction with Lacey Von Erich after Angelina Love has legitimate issues with her visa. And it is a big transformation, for the women in the Beautiful People. It's an adjustment for fans too, who were just used to seeing Angelina Love in that prominent position in the Beautiful People. And even looking back, I don't feel that was even fair to Lacey, because she was just brought in and she's immediately put into, honestly, the leader of the Beautiful People. I don't know why that decision was made, but even then, they still made good TV, but it just wasn't the same with Angelina being gone. So we see, and right at the tail end of 2009 going to 2010, that the Knockouts tag teams are getting proper attention. And we see a tag team of Awesome Kong and Hamada develop, and they even win the titles. And I had to look back at this because this was a time where I was kind of slipping in and out of TNA, so I kind of forgot about a lot of the teams that we saw form around this Knockouts tag team division. I really forgot about that. But these are two women that obviously I love seeing in TNA. So I really thought it was cool that they actually tagged together. And that's just a perfect team right there, if I'm being honest. So they won that tag team and really held it well for the time that they did. It was a super long time that they had it, but I think that they're definitely one to mention in this year as prominent holders of that title. So we also see ODB and Tara continue their feud that sees the Knockouts title change hands over time, and they really brought out the best of each other in these series of matches that they had. We also see Angelina Love get her revenge on Velvet Sky, Madison Rayne, and Lexi when she makes her comeback, which was really cool to see. Angelina actually come back and then once again have a strong character and really make it clear that she was the head of the Beautiful People and stake that claim and really have the fans behind her because they were really excited to see her back. So we see another return during this time for the Knockouts division with Mickie James actually returning. As I said in the beginning of the episode, we had Alexa Lurie and the early stages of TNA. But when Mickie James comes, she has had this this amazing career in WWE, and she really has obviously the strong following of people knowing her as Mickie James. So I'm pretty sure it must have been cool after having the Alexa Lurie being part of the Ravens flock in 2003 and having that very different character to her coming back as Mickie James and really having such a strong following and bringing that hardcore country type of character to TNA at the time. And with her making a name for herself, it was obviously a no-brainer that Mickie was going to be a top-tier player on the Knockouts division. And she immediately started a feud with Tara that tops off with a cage match that main events an episode of Impact, and it was absolutely an incredible match. So we see Mickie come in strong when she comes into the company. And we have Brooke Tessmacher that comes in at this time in 2010, and she makes a strong impact on the roster as well. We also see at this time this exodus towards like the mid to late 2010 with a lot of knockouts actually leaving. We have Awesome Kong leave, Alicia Flash, who's also Marsha Saeed, Roxy Laveau, Tracy Brooks, ODB for a certain amount of time, Taylor Wilde for a bit, Tara for a bit. Even though a lot of them did return either months later or a few years later, it did make an impact that a lot of these women were leaving at the time for the reasons that they had. And even though some women will return, you start to see the things that made TNA unique start to wilt away, possibly due to higher-ups wanting to compete with WWE so much at this time that they took away the things that made TNA special to begin with, especially when you started to have a lot of ex-WWE wrestlers or ex-backstage talent come into the company, start to tear away at the fabric of what I feel made TNA great. So you start to really see that in 2010. So we get into Madison Rain's reign as champion. She's really holding that title well, and she has where Mickie James wants to challenge for that title. And at this time, Tara is being used as Madison Rain's henchwoman at the time. And Madison takes a few too far, and this leads to an intense match at Lockdown between Mickie James and Madison Rain. And that was another great feud that led to Mickie James being able to hold that Knockouts title. We also see in 2011 that Gail Kim returns to TNA. And I have to say that I was so excited to see Gail Kim come back, especially when you saw the way that WWE was utilizing Gail Kim at the time. But I didn't like that she came in as a heel to just assist Karen Jarrett's evil antics, because I felt like she should have had a comeback that made a bit more sense, especially with Gail at the time that she even left TNA at the end of 2008. She was at the top of the mountain for TNA, so it would not have made sense for her to just come back as if like she's a hired help to Karen Jarrett. So I love that Gail Kim came back at the time, but I did not like how they made her return. I started to feel like that was trying to put the spotlight on someone else versus at the moment just being for Gail Kim returning, especially after being gone for several years. So at this time, we start to see a new character, Winter, come in, and she's working with Angelina Love as this obsessed woman that's always been a fan of Angelina's work and now wants to start partnering with her and just be attached at the hip. And Winter really starts to take over Angelina's psyche and control her, leaving Angelina in a trance and zombie-like state. And you really start to see this really different character of Angelina come into the fold, that Angelina has been very vocal about saying that this was not a time in TNA that she really enjoyed, because she's known as being very eccentric, really being able to talk well on the mic, and you see all of that removed for this this zombie-like character that you saw Angelina Love. And I loved Winter's character, but I didn't feel that that made sense for Angelina to completely transform her character. and obviously Angelina felt the same way. We also see at this time that Rosita comes in and she's paired off with Sarita, and they really take to holding that title, that women's tag team championship at the time, and that was really refreshing to see. We also see at this time the debut of China, which also happens to be the only time that we see China in TNA. And she comes in for her first and only appearance to tag with Kurt Angle to face off against Karen and Jeff Jarrett. And this could have been great, but obviously we've heard the story several times on why China couldn't really be brought in. And obviously a lot of us as fans felt like this could have been ignored to really see what China could have done. But just like I stated, in the 2010 year of TNA, you can really start to see that everything is starting to mirror what WWE, ex-WWE star is going to come into TNA and how we're going to put everything towards that, versus, I feel, still focusing on the women that really made TNA great. Focusing on the men and women that made TNA great, who were homegrown talent that still had a lot in the runs that they were having in the company at the time, and how they could have really still pushed towards that. They were really trying to create, at this time, in my opinion, an imitation of WWE. Now, if they brought China in, and let's say there could have actually been an actual program for China, I think that she could have done amazing things with the women's roster at that time. But even with that, just like we're seeing Karen Jarrett come into it, it started to feel like at that point, many times the women were being used to just have a story completely surround Karen Jarrett and not really show what they could do. And just like I said, you had a mass exodus of a lot of women that left at that time because they were not happy with a lot of the storylines they were getting. And that's why I strategically stopped this episode with 2011, because all of the things that really made up those early years of women being involved in TNA to get to the point where they had a knockouts division started to go away at this time. So I don't really consider a lot of what happened after that point to really be what the makeup was of TNA. At that point, even though the name hadn't changed yet, we really started to see that it became more of a different company at that time than what started off, and what really made people start talking about TNA as the years had gone by, and it started becoming something else. So I wanted to make sure that I was highlighting the things that really made TNA unique and what really made it stand out, and also talent that you didn't see from any other places. They were really being made on the indie circuit and then transitioning to TNA. And these were great moments to look back on. And as we know, in 2017, that's when TNA officially announced that they were Impact Wrestling. And there were still great moments. You still had an amazing women's division that continued to evolve. But I just wanted to make sure that this episode that I highlighted those early TNA years where these women were really just trying to push for a division, and when they had the keys to the kingdom, they completely delivered on that. So I really hope that you enjoyed this look down memory lane, and I really hope that you check out the Hard to Kill pay-per-view, because I will say the way that TNA has been promoting this pay-per-view, showing off the new titles over the past few days, giving us 30 days of TNA on YouTube channel where they've been showing some awesome memories from the yesteryears of TNA has been really cool, that I am really looking forward to seeing everything that they're going to bring out for this pay-per-view. I even have in my head, like, some people, it's probably a dream, but like certain people that I would love that they would bring back during this pay-per-view, but that's obviously to be seen. Let's see. Who would you like to see wrestle against Mayu Iwatani and Julia and TNA? That's a really good question. with all of the questions now around Julia, I mean, who's to say where Julia would be as these months go by? You know, who's to say where she might be? But I would personally love to see her make some appearances in TNA. I would really like to see Julia possibly face off against Masha Slamovich. I think that would be really cool. Mayu, I would really like to see have that interaction with Trinity and see what can come from that, because she's certainly a champion. So I would love to see her just try to go right to the top, the head of the division, and have some interaction with Trinity. That would be really cool. But I feel like this new revamped stage or era for TNA is going to be really great. And I really think that we're in for a treat with this pay-per-view. I think it's going to be jam-packed with a lot of amazing talent from the present day, really showing how they're going to take TNA in this next era. Possibly seeing some great showings of women and men from the past, and TNA possibly make appearances to just give us that nostalgic feeling of what TNA was in the past. So I think it's going to be a blend of both on Saturday night. So I'm really looking forward to it. I would like to see Julia versus Killer Kelly and Jordan Grace and all of that, Giselle Shaw. I definitely agree that would be cool, seeing all of those combinations. The great thing about TNA is that they're always willing to have these dream matches with women that are men that are part of other organizations, and keep great relationships with these other promotions, so that we as fans can feel spoiled with the different matches that they can put on. So anything is possible in this next year with TNA. So I thank you guys for joining this episode. I think that 2024 for TNA would be amazing. I was excited to see the merch come back, to see the logo already come back. It's very nostalgic for me. And just like I said, I think with this new era, with the amazing talent that TNA has, that is going to be a great year for TNA. And yes, if you guys are excited about it, make sure you watch Hard to Kill on Saturday at 8 o'clock. With them being in Vegas, is really the great tone to just set that anything is possible for that pay-per-view, that anything can happen. So I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about what's ahead for a deep dive as we get into more conversations about women's wrestling. And I hope that you continue to stay tuned. It was awesome coming back after an amazing break, but we are now back full-fledged, and I can't wait to show you what else we have in store for Deep Dive. Thanks, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.